um, and we've provided some links which are in your inbox. Jocelyn sent those out this morning, which are designed for practice through this coming week, as well as a longer piece written by Cynthia Bourgeot and describing her involvement and teaching from Thomas Keating, who's sort of the father of centering prayer. So our session 2 will be inviting you guys in that sort of that, not a true interview session, but a sharing session of that practice and how that's going, and just more open. So this is going to be more Emily and I telling our stories in a little bit of a way, and there should be time at the end for some questions and dialogue as well. So we hope that it's a good place for you to be this morning.
Hey, good deal. You want to start, Susan? You want to tell us a little bit about how you came to centering prayer? When did you begin to practice?
Okay. When I was thinking, I came up with the date 2015, but then I thought, well, wait a minute. When I was 15, I took up a meditation practice. I was studying Eastern teachings and yoga and things like that. And so before school in the mornings, I would get up early and practice meditation. And all the way even through college, I was still studying Eastern religions and stuff. But I found my way back to my Christian roots, and I was trying to think when it was, maybe around 2012 or so. Leaving church, had just a little quick chat with Bill Stecker, and he quoted something from Richard Rohr, and I said, who? And he said, you don't know Rohr? And I said, no, I've never heard of him. And so that was a very pivotal moment for my spiritual journey, because I subscribed to the daily meditations and then took a deep dive through Rohr's books, the Enneagram. Then Jim Daniels came as our interim priest, and Jim, of course, spent that Lenten series on the Enneagram. So I felt like, wow, this river's, I'm just going to keep following this where it's taken me. And I remember at Bishop Porter Taylor's probably last visit to the church as bishop, we were having a conversation, and because Jim had already mentioned to me Cynthia Bourgeot and said, you should read her work. I think you would really like her, Susan. And Porter said, you should go to her wisdom school. And I said, there's a school for that? So a lot of things came together really through contacts through Grace Church. And I found my way in and began an actual practice in 2015.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a blessing.
Yeah, your path is similar to mine. Timetable is a little different, but sort of the same thing. I practiced meditations of different types. I was very spiritually hungry all my life, and I practiced meditation, explored meditation, different types, and nothing clicked. But I started to get the concepts of sitting, being quiet, quietening my mind, learning to ground myself, and the various teachings around these practices started to invite curiosity. And then I stumbled across insight meditation, Vipassana, when I moved to California, and found a teacher, Jack Cornfield. A lot of you have heard me talk about Jack, and basically studied with him for the next 35 years and practiced meditation off and on. But at the same time, I felt a disconnect between all this Eastern philosophy, even though it was Americanized through Jack, and my roots. When I moved to North Carolina, Joyce Way Brooks came to me with Arlene and said, we want to start a centering prayer practice, and we understand you meditate. And I said, yes, but I don't know anything about centering prayer as it is practiced in the Christian tradition. So I had the path of, how am I going to lead this when I don't know anything about it? And then as I started to practice, I read Thomas Keating and I read Cynthia Bourgeot. I started reading Richard Rohr. Very quickly, I was consuming this stuff, so I knew what I was doing a little bit. And I said to people as I led in the church for that year and a half, almost 2 years, I'm a novice at this. I'm not a novice at meditation, but I am a novice at centering prayer. And I guess then Susan, I connected with you. We had the Thomas group. And from there, we did the Sindering, I don't know which came first, Wisdom School, Reading Cynthia, the Thomas group. It all came together. And my practice of meditation changed. And I realized one day that I was really listening. It had changed from me letting go of me to me listening to the other, waiting for the other. And this hunger, this spiritual hunger had started to fill God started to fill me. God entered into the equation. And that aligned with my becoming closer to the people in the church and getting to know people and understanding what they were doing, why they were there. So it's been an very rapid, but to me, it felt very gradual evolution in the last 8 years or so, and then 5 really rapidly since 2015. I wanted to ask you the question so everybody here who's participating could understand, what did your practice look like? I mean, literally, what does it look like when you sit down to practice?
Well, in the beginning, 2015, after attending that first school at Cayuga and having a large group session where everyone was doing a group sit, that helped me understand a little bit more about what the process meant.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe how it was different from Eastern or Buddhist style meditation. And, my goal initially was in the phrase centering prayer to become more centered, more grounded, to be open. Cynthia and other teachers talk a good bit about centering one's self, one's awareness in the heart space. And with that open space, there's a subtle flow that allows God in. As you said, God becomes part of the equation. And so it's a practice. Thomas Keating's recommendation, and Cynthia told her students the same, and I think it's a good basis, is twice a day for 20 minutes. That's kind of the standard recommendation. Our practice pages this week are beginning with 10 minutes because that's what I began with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's something to work into. And time is such a relative thing, as everybody knows. And when you're beginning a sit and a discipline and a practice, just like with an instrument, say a piano, I mean, you're not going to jump in and be playing a symphony. You're going to start with just a scale, perhaps. So keep that in mind. I think if you wish to develop a centering prayer practice, is to start with the consistency as best you can in terms of daily practice, but don't try to set a time goal that doesn't work for you. I'm retired. Randy and I have an empty house together, and lots of times he's off on the golf course or in the garden or whatnot. So it's very easy for me. It's accessible for me to have that time twice a day. When I think back in being a working mother and teacher, trying to build that time in, much more challenging. So it's not about the time, but I think it's a worthy goal to set aside regular time, just like we do with worship. We set aside time for morning prayer when we can. We set aside for Sunday worship. The ministries that many of us are committed to, those are ways that we have already a discipline. And I connect the word discipline to disciple. I mean, that's the same root word. And I feel like building in some discipline for prayer in one's life is essential. It's
like any other vital habit.
Yeah.
Eating, sleeping,
nutrition. Yeah. It's food for the soul.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, my practice started out, I thought I had to have trappings, a candle and a place that looked spiritual and, an altar. And I do all of those things, but those have become less important. I found when I was studying with Jack before I moved over into centering prayer as the focus of my meditation practice or my contemplation practice, I was still working with Vipassana more than anything. And I was working in high tech, and I would get up at 6 a.m. and go, and sometimes I wouldn't leave the office until 7 or 8 at night. So I used to go out to my car in the parking lot and shut the door. And I had one of those sun things that you put up in front of your windshield. And I would put that up on one in front of me and then turn one of them beside me. And I would park in such a way that I was at the end of the line. So I was blocked, and I had this little box I could sit in, and I practiced in my car. And I think, I wasn't out there very long, 20, like you say, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but it was a break for me from that craziness. And it was something that I did when I was working. Now I'm retired too, so it's the same. And I practice first thing in the morning, and then I practice either at dinner time, right before dinner, by myself in my room, or I wait until the evening. Bill goes to bed, and then I'm there by myself, and I'll practice before I go to bed.
Yeah.
But the habit of doing it is vital for me. And it's like, for me, when I sit, I just immediately start to draw down. It's after doing it so much, it's the just going to the place, and it's like going into the sanctuary. You go into the
How you
church,
feel.
you feel that, you feel you're ready, you feel you're there, you're open. And even in times of stress, you go there, and it's wonderful to have that inside you. So that's one of the reasons that I keep doing it. We've talked about our teachers. I'm looking at our questions here so we can move along a little bit. I'm curious if you ever had a community in your life close at hand that supported you with centering prayer, with meditation, your practice. Now, you've mentioned your teachers, and you've mentioned Wisdom School.
Well, when we started our Thomas group in January of 2016, and this was a small group but faithful. We met for 2 years, and we were reading the Gospel of Thomas. There's a copy of this available in the library at church. And this was something that I learned about from experiencing the Cynthia Bourgeau's Wisdom School 1 at Cayuga in 2015. And lots of folks that were there were beginning these small groups at often their church. So that we did that as well. That was a very powerful community for me. I also attended the Scottish pilgrimage with Orion, and Pam and Rob were along, and the Ladicos were there, several other folks. This was a group from Grace primarily. This was a spiritual community on the road. I mean, a pilgrimage is an amazing kind of community that stays with you long after the actual journey with your feet ends, because the journey continues inside for a long, long time to come. So those are 2 communities directly connected with Grace Church. But most of my life before that, no community whatsoever. I was a spiritual loner. As you said, Emily, you were hungry your whole life. Yeah, I was a born seeker. I mean, I mentioned, meditation practice at 15. That's a little strange, I think, but it was the 60s. It was the 60s. So there was more of that going on. But still, I never had a community, and didn't really think that was a possibility. But I feel an intense community of connection through Grace, because just in small ways, there might be like a Facebook post about a comment or a quote, or somebody, did you read such and such book? And I know there are those among us who have a longing to know God in a more intense and personal and immediate way. And we are understanding that way in involves stillness. It involves silence, candles optional, incense optional, the trappings, all that, the accoutrement. Because the more that you practice this prayer, the more it drops away. And where Keating was in his instruction, because he recently died at 95. God bless his soul. He was a giant of a teacher, a giant of a man. And the ultimate dropping away is the ego, the so-called false self, the part of us that thinks that we're the real center of reality.
Mm. Mhm.
And, we get to experience God as that center. And it doesn't mean we're no longer needed. God created us. Of
Yeah.
course we're needed.
Yeah.
And we have an individual self. We have our own unique color of this that we shine out in that spectrum of light. And that's our place. And we serve a purpose.
Mm.
But getting the priority right, I think centering prayer can help us get the priority right of our role as an individual, as a part of
Mm.
the greater being of God and all of each other together. And
Yeah.
that's how I
Yeah,
understand it.
I uh, focused in on control in what you were just saying. I'm sort of veering off the questions here because, hey, I'm veering off the questions. Yeah, I mean, I think we start talking about why do we do it? How does it affect our spiritual lives? How does it affect the rest of our lives? Why are we doing this? And when I was first studying it as centering prayer as a Christian practice, not a meditation practice, but as a way to worship, I looked into what types of prayers are there. We have all these words we go to God with. We thank God, we praise God, we ask God to heal our wounds or heal the wounds of others. And I'm sure I remember at the time I looked them up, and there were different, depending on who you looked at and who you were reading, there was 7 different kinds of prayer, but they all involved us talking to God.
Right.
And centering prayer is God talking to us. And because God is the great mystery, we have the teachings of Jesus, and we have the Bible, and we have the structure of the church, but ultimately when it's us alone in our room, in our closet, one with God, for me, that means my heart. That room is my heart. And I carry that with me everywhere I go. So the more I practice, the more I'm out in the world, the more what I practice comes through my heart and how I live. And that's why I do it. And I didn't find that in any book. I didn't find it in any instructions on how to do it or reasons to do it. It's just sort of been the result of the practice, and I see it. And the more I practice, the more.
Come in. Is there a little boy there?
Diane, thank you. Anyway, I wanted to say that in response to how centering prayer affects our spiritual lives. What does it mean for us to do this, or how has it affected my relationship with God? God, it's a growing thing. It's not a static thing. And I wanted to put it out there as a result of my lifelong stance of being hungry, seeking. I'm being filled, and that's why I keep doing it.
When you say the word filled, it reminded me of my bumper sticker I got at Wisdom School. I have by my back door next to a little sign that says slow down. These are my out the door teachings to myself, but the bumper sticker says kenosis fills. And kenosis is a Greek word for emptiness. And the teaching in the Gospels where Jesus, this is Paul. This is where Paul described how Jesus, rather than seeking to be glorified or to claim Godhead for himself, instead he emptied himself as a slave. I'm not quoting Paul correctly here, but I think y'all mostly know the passage. He emptied himself and gave himself up even to death on a cross. So this emptying process is an action. It's an inner action. And it is subtle. It's not like, oh, switch is on. But it comes and goes. And so let's say during a 20-minute sit, if you're effort, your intention that you set, because this is a big key part of in centering prayer, is the intention, is sort of the journey itself. And so that intention offered up to be available and open to God's presence is essentially a letting go. And that's another way to understand what kenosis is
Yeah.
emptying.
Yeah.
Because if we're full, there's no space for God's
no.
presence.
Yeah.
So the more able we can open ourselves, the more space for God.
Right. Right. I'm looking here to see if we've sort of talked about everything that we wanted to cover.
Well, one thing I wanted to add too, about how it affects your everyday life, for me, Randy and I have been married for 40 years. I would describe him as a hard-headed man. He would describe me as a hard-headed woman. That's part of our secret, I suppose. But I have most tangibly noticed flowering and growth within our marriage and our relationship since my regular centering prayer practice, 5 years now, and seeing that I am more able to let go. I don't have to be right all the time. To let go in those same that same inner stance of openness to God. I'm open to my husband. I'm open to others, and so it's ego getting out of the way. So centering prayer, I mean, spills into your life, and the gifts keep on giving in so many ways. So that's something I'm very aware of, that it's helpful in just ordinary everyday relationships. I also understand scripture, I think, better
Through that lens.
through the practice of centering prayer. It's more open, the scriptural readings. And another saying I've really enjoyed that was also is Cynthia's, is she said toward the end of one of her books, I think it was a book about Mary Magdalene, and she said, the kingdom of God is not later, it's lighter. And I love the double entendre of the word, the double meaning of the word lighter, because I think of it as lightness, of us able to shed some of the heaviness of this world. And at the same time, light filled.
Yeah.
And that the space of God's presence and the light that we are able to inhabit.
Yeah. One of the questions we had down was how is when we first started practicing look different to the way we practice now? And I think what you're talking about is one of the things that I have noticed. When I first started practicing, I went and there it was that 20-minute session, and I did it and I felt good after I did it. Why am I doing this? How does this fit? And I do it again, and I did it again, and I practiced again. And over time, what you were talking about ripening into other relationships, it spread out of my practice into my life, and what it means to let go really started to take on depth, because if you practice, you learn how to let go. You're there, you're having that good sit, if you will, that real good session where you feel quiet, and you really are quiet, and your mind calms down and your heart opens, and you leave, and then it trickles away. It's like going to church and you have that moment where you just feel at one with God and the community you're with, worshiping with, and then you leave and something annoys you, and you're 20 minutes away from the sanctuary and you're swearing at somebody on the highway. Those kinds of things start to be funny. You start recognizing how you're controlling all the time. And really what control means, really what ego means, not in a sit down with your shrink kind of way, but in a sit down with yourself kind of way. How you want to be right, how you really want to be right, and why that doesn't really matter. Do you know?
Yeah.
So that has what has happened to me, because let me tell you, I am a Chatfield, and Chatfields are always right. That's how we were reared, and we have these huge family arguments and break out the research materials and why did this happen? Who does this happen? Gotta know, gotta be in charge. And I took that out and I lived my life like that, my first half of my life. Even as I was doing all this searching, I didn't realize that this was what I was bringing to the party every day, every minute. It's so much less important now. And when you let that all go, then the force that drives the green fuse, as Gerard Manley Hopkins would say, comes in. And then you can live differently. It's a surprise. It's exciting because you're learning stuff about how you can live in the world in a wonderful way that has nothing to do with you figuring it out or you taking control.
Taking over.
So
yeah.
that's my advertisement for centering prayer.
Yeah. And I wanted to say a little bit about the practice itself, because we've talked a lot and shared a lot of our own personal story. But to a person just beginning who has never, what is this centering? I think centering, the word itself, is helpful. I glom onto that as like, well, this is something I can think of like a bicycle balance, that sense of two-ness, good, bad, light, dark, heaven, hell, all the dualities of the world we inhabit, that, is part of our human condition. That centering practice can help us develop a greater sense of oneness. So what Keating taught, and Cynthia also, she has 2 books about the actual practice, if you're interested to get more. It's really quite simple. Begin by finding a quiet place where you won't be interrupted, a place where you feel comfortable. Some people sit on a meditation cushion or a sofa cushion or what have you on a floor. I sit in a corner. I have a sofa with a corner and 2 pillows behind me to help me keep my back straight. And I do sit with my legs crossed. I'm comfortable that way, but whatever works for you. You do want your body to be comfortable and nothing pinching, even, just for a few minutes. So getting seated, getting quiet, having a private space where you won't be interrupted, and then some sort of timer. Anything that your timer on your phone that will just chime at the end of the time that you have set. There are meditation apps that have all that, but just any timer. Close your eyes and breathe. Be aware of your breath is always a good, and that's a universal practice to all meditation practices that I've ever encountered, is focusing on the breath. And then what Cynthia taught was the idea of having a word. Now, this is not a mantra, but a single word like God or peace or love or surrender, any kind of word that is a touchstone sort of word for you. And that word serves as like a little sticky note in your awareness, a little tether for your attention, because our attention will wander. We'll get into visual awareness, we'll get into recall, memory, we'll get into future to-do lists. That's the human mind.
Sound, you'll get distracted.
You get distracted. And so having that touchstone word that is the one you use each time, not a new word every time, but that word, it's not like it's magic or has any potency or power. It's a reminder. It's that string on the balloon that tugs your attention back to the letting go, because the letting go itself is the practice.
Right. If I could jump in and just add too, it doesn't have to be a word. If you're not a word person, or if words activate your mind and make you start thinking about something, it can be that candle in front of you.
Yes.
Don't shut your eyes. Have your eyes half closed when you recognize, oh, I've trailed down the path of thinking or whatever. Candle, light, whatever. Look at that. Or breath. Just go,
just go with breath.
Burning, and then breathe again, because anything that will calm you down and shut your mind down, shut that monkey mind off, will work. So
and be gentle with yourself, and know that the mind will constantly, curiously investigate and be active. And that's the way we're made. It's not a flaw. It's not a failing. It's not a sin. It's being human. And so accepting and loving in a gracious, gentle way. I think some people struggle with meditation and centering prayer and this kind of stillness for many reasons, but I think a common reason is that they become an inner struggle. There's
Mm.
an inner struggle, and there's an inner critic that is, well, you're not, saying the word, or you're not paying attention to your breath, or you're thinking too much. And there's an inner dialogue. And if we resist actively our own selves, then our attention is immediately sucked into resistance.
Right.
If we just let that go with the generosity of spirit that God lets us go and be the free beings that were created, without holding on to us with a will, that we are released
Yeah,
by God. So release ourselves.
I think this is where Vipassana meditation really served me, because I'd had years of hearing my teachers say, "Oh, just thinking. It's all just thinking. No big deal."
Mm-hmm.
And there were different ways of it's just a leaf on the river, let it float away.
Yeah.
Just forget, just let it go. Just let it
Yeah.
go.
Don't
Keating
cling to
said
that.
something like, didn't Thomas Keating say something like, it's just one more wonderful opportunity to return.
Yeah. Well, there's a story where they were in a session, and this one of the nuns was struggling with centering prayer and said, "Oh, Father, I don't know. I can never do this. I had 10,000 times during our meditation where I was thinking and left the prayer." And Keating said, "Oh, wonderful. That's 10,000 opportunities to return to God." So he flipped it as it's not a bad thing or a struggle. It's just like, here's another invitation. God's calling you back because God has nowhere else to go but to be right here with you.
That's
And
the practice.
yeah.
That's the practice. That's what it means to practice. It's not
Yeah.
something else. You're not going to sit down an empty mind and it's going to, well, Emily, today, this is what that's not going to happen. I don't want to be silly about it, but there's not, maybe someone somewhere had that happen. Good for them.
Well, and as Westerners, we tend to inhabit the mind to such a great degree. But one thing I've learned on this journey is that the Christians, the early Christians, the Desert Mothers and Fathers, they lived a contemplative life. This is not something we had to get from India or Japan or Thailand or West. We've had this all along. This is our Christian heritage. It's being rediscovered and unearthed in documents that prove this kind of teaching and study, going back to the Gospel of Thomas and Gospel of Mary Magdalene, some of these that were just discovered in the 20th century. We're learning that Christianity has always had this path of contemplation, and maybe to an even greater degree and a finer degree. And so I love that. I love knowing this is my own faith tradition, and it's a stream that is always there running beneath, and I can access it anytime.
Talk
And
about
there's no
chanting,
conflict.
Susan. You just reminded me of Pauline Meyer with the stream running.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we use chanting at the Wisdom School. Do you ever use chanting in your own practice?
I do actually. I have several recordings of various chants, Darlene's chants that we had met at Wisdom School, and Paulette Meyer, who is a Quaker woman with a beautiful a cappella voice. She has 2 albums out. I would highly recommend them. They're short, beautiful letters from Quakers like George Fox and others that she set, just short pieces. I often begin my centering prayer sit, particularly my morning sit, with playing one of Pauline's chants. Yeah, that's her newest album, Wellsprings of Life, and it's on Apple Music, I know, probably Spotify. Absolutely beautiful. I find that music helps me get ready for my practice. So like maybe lighting a candle, whatever. It's not essential, but it's a gift to myself. I get that music and I can play that, and it helps me relax and be ready to sit comfortably for 20 minutes. So I'm glad you mentioned chanting. Chanting does go way back, of course. I mean, throughout the Middle Ages, the monks chanted for centuries.
Right.
And they chanted the Psalms.
I find the loving kindness meditation that I practice is a way to get ready for centering prayer in the same way chant is, you know, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe.
Yeah.
May my life be filled with ease.
Yeah.
May your life be happy. May you, and I'll go about my morning ablutions, whatever, brushing my hair, whatever, saying this to myself. And then I do my practice. And that calms me, that brings me to a focus, and then I sit.
Yeah.
And if I'm rattled, if I have a hard day, if I'm having a hard time, if things are really stressful, that really helps me a lot.
Yeah. No, I wanted to mention, because we're about to wrap up here, is that, again, in your email, the second one that Jocelyn sent out with a specific Zoom link for this session and some links, there are 7 PDF files, one of which is a longer piece. It was during Richard Rohr's daily meditations when Cynthia took over for about 2 weeks. We included that. And then the others are practice pages.
There it is.
Yeah, the practice pages for each day beginning on Monday. So we'd like you to work with those this week, and the 10-minute sit, and 10 minutes is suggested. Yeah, so Emily, can you come back to our regular
I'm not
view?
doing this. I think Jocelyn's driving the bus.
Okay, thank you. But at any rate, I think it might be helpful for us to keep a prayer journal, or notes.
No, I think a couple of sentences. Well, how did it go for you? Do you have any questions? What worked?
Right.
Didn't work?
Right. Because next Sunday, when we meet again in this session, we want to hear from you about how the experience went, how it's going for you. Some of you may already be established in a centering prayer practice, and that can give us some of your insights and share some of this process like Emily and I've done today. But these are just starting points for a session each week. There's a short piece of a reading. We've put in a few non-Christians in terms of sources of wisdom teaching, in addition to more familiar sources perhaps, but that shows the universality of this practice of accessing God.
Since we have a few minutes before, I don't know, we go to 10:15, do we not, Jocelyn?
I think it's 10.
You can go to 10:10. That'd be great, and then I can stop the recording and still get ready for 10:30 Eucharist.
I just wanted to give everybody who's on the call an opportunity to. Are you ready to go out and try it? Do you have questions? Is there anything that you want to say? I don't want to just sit here and be the talking head all the way to the end.
Yeah.
No, I think the tools that you've given us, that the Monday, Tuesday, that helps me. I'm kind of I want a roadmap, and I have ants in my pants, so 10 minutes is probably a good place for me to start.
You might try walking, if you have a place where you can go outside and just, and by walking, I mean very slowly putting one foot on the ground in front of you, and it goes down and stays there for a little while. And then very slowly you pick up your other foot. I'm not talking about hiking around your yard. Very slowly, just being in your body might calm the ants.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Earl.
Hi. Fine. This is terrific. You both Susan and Emily, this is wonderful. You mentioned breath. For me, focusing on the tips of my nostrils and feeling the breath coming in and the exhalation, and sensing my chest rising and falling as I breathe. Those things bring me into the moment in a way that is terrific for me. And as you say, the mind continually wants to go in its own way. And as we know, the mind is either trying to deal with future things or past things, but doesn't do very well staying in the moment. And so I can sit and try to solve problems or deal with my guilt or whatever it is coming up out of the past. And if I return to the breath, and specifically to the tip of my nostrils, it brings me back into the moment. And so that's my kind of method for coming back. I love candles, and I love a bell, and I love the chanting and all the methods you've talked about. But the most profound one for me is simply feeling the breath in all of its dimensions, because the breath is in the moment.
Yes.
It's
Mhm.
not in past or future.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So when I'm there, I'm able to let go of the mind and
Yeah.
move into the body.
Yeah, very good. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Earl, for bringing that up.
Yeah.
That's great.
That bodily awareness is in the
Mhm.
moment. Thank you.
I
And
think
also, as Susan was talking about the sitting before, how to sit, I sit with my feet on the floor. It really helps me to feel grounded, literally, no pun intended, but my feet are on the ground. I am on the ground. And then the breath.
Mentioned Emily, walking meditation.
Mhm.
What's so important when we do a walking meditation is to feel the earth, to feel our feet moving, the various bones of the feet and the muscles of the feet moving, so that we want to walk very slowly and put our heel down, and then
Yeah.
move to the center of the foot, then to the toes of the foot. And again, that's another technique to use the physical to
Yeah.
let go of mind and be in the present.
I have a quick story I'll tell about walking meditation. I was at a retreat with Jack Cornfield, and his teacher from Burma, Ajahn Chah, came, and he was late. And there were about 300 people at this center waiting for this man to show up. And we were all excited, and he was getting here any minute. And then he was late, and then he was really late. And finally somebody said, he's here, he's here. I see the monks coming, and they were all in their orange robes way down at the end of the parking lot. And all of the monks, younger monks who were his entourage, hurried up. You know, they were clearly aware that he was late. And we all went to the windows, and these big, at Spirit Rock, there are these big glass windows in the center, and you can look out over this California rolling hill. He was way down at the bottom. They all ran up ahead, and it took him about 15 minutes to come from the parking lot to our room. He was preparing himself to come and talk. And we all started watching, like, is he going to come? What's wrong? Is he sick? And then eventually, oh, you know, and we all calmed down, and we all one by one went back to our chairs and seat. And when he finally came in, there was this breath of, he's here, and we get it. And it was a way to teach that was just an amazing, how to let go, how to calm down, how to be grounded, and how to walk, how to do walking meditation.
I think what I'll draw on is one of Jocelyn's sermons about breathing in Yah and Hui, Yahweh,
Like that.
and my yoga practice.
Oh yeah.
And I think that I can knit with my eyes closed if it's a simple stitch, that might really help me center, because I'm an active person and my mind's like this. So I'll need a lot of tools.
Thank you, Mary Alice. You know, the Marthas do the Father, Son, Holy Spirit when they knit. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Father. When you knit a prayer shawl, that's one of the practices.
That's lovely.
Mhm.
Silly example, but not really. Billy Casper, one of the great golfers in the 50s, when he was going to a tournament to play, he would eat breakfast slowly, dress slowly, drive slowly to the golf course, get out of his get his clubs slowly and so forth. And why did he do that? Is because in golf, if you're going to be good at it, you have to be precisely in the moment when you're hitting the shot. You can't think of what you do afterwards or what you didn't do 2 minutes ago. But if you stay in the moment, you have a chance to put everything together, body, mind, and spirit, as you hit the shot. And when that happens, as we all know as athletes, and it could be in any walk of life, when body, mind, and spirit go together, it's magic. It's
Yeah.
so incredible. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen very often, but when it does, it's heaven on earth.
Yes. And on that note, does anybody have anything else? I don't want to drag this out beyond what Jocelyn can record, and she needs to go to her second service, get ready for that. So questions?
Well, we hope the practice pages and the other teaching from Cynthia that you can access are useful this week. And we look forward to hearing from you next Sunday, and we wish you blessings on the journey. Thank you for joining us today. And
Yeah. Also, if anybody has a question during the week and you want to ask somebody about it, I'm here. Give me a call right in my little house.
Yeah. Reach out anytime.
Yeah.
Who is V?
Vicky.
Vicky Gribble.
Oh, okay. Hi, Vicky.
Yeah. So peace, God's peace be with each of you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yes. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Yes,
Thanks,
you.
guys.